So there's an author and a speaker that I follow named Dan White Jr., and he talks and writes about neighborhood. And one of the intentional practices that he engages in his neighborhood is anytime a moving truck arrives in his neighborhood for somebody to move in or out, he offers to help. And there have been times that this has been inconvenient. He tells the story of being in a full suit, ready to go oversee a funeral, and a moving truck pulled in, and he like, okay, here we go. And this intentional practice of welcoming neighbors in right when they're first landing is something that he says he's seen tremendous fruit from. And it got me thinking about neighboring and the conversation we were having on Sunday, and this important distinction of the spontaneous and the intentional things we do. See, the story of the Good Samaritan is in some ways a spontaneous response. That there was a person in need on the path. And we could think of a path as a metaphor of our day, that we are going to experience and find people in our path, in our day, that need help. And I think Lois's comment and response was bringing this up, that who is my neighbor? Well, anyone that I run into, anyone that I have opportunity to love, to bless, to serve. And she wasn't wrong. And then Stuart's comment is also super relevant and true, that our neighbors are also specific people, and they live around us, or they're the people we work next to at the office, or we see at the playground in our area, in our neighborhood. And so these intentional relationships require the intentional response of love. And so both of these things are valid, and I want to talk a little bit today about the intentional. So one of the tools that I like, and it's a really good primer, it's a book called The Art of Neighboring. And one of their exercises is just to make a quick sketch map of your neighbors. Maybe just draw like blocks or little house icons, and write down the neighbors you know, their names. First names is good. You might know more information. You might write down just a few things about them, maybe their jobs, what they do, what they're interested in. For me, my neighbor Mike, I know he's interested in music. Across the street, Rick is a neighbor who is into UFC and fight nights, and down the street, Dale is a neighbor who is interested in the neighborhood. He's like my neighborhood news. He tells me all the things that are happening, sends me texts if he doesn't see me. And so these little quick jot notes about just a little bit of something. And the art of neighboring is just to bring awareness to the fact that these people that live around us are real people with real names, with real jobs, with real identities, and we should be curious. We should be interested in their lives. Another intentional practice is the shifting from the backyard represents our private life, and shifting from the backyard to the front yard, where we move into the common space of our neighborhood. With my neighborhood, for example, the sidewalk is a thoroughfare. People are constantly coming and going on the sidewalk. And so me sitting on my front porch, sitting on my picnic table that we put out in the front lawn, and being present there is an intentional shift to be present in the space my neighbors inhabit. Whereas if I'm sitting in my backyard, I don't have that. And many times our backyards are cloistered off with high privacy fences, and so it's all the more easy to hide from my neighbors. There's actually the infrastructure of suburban development is the parking garages on the side of the house, and so you can pull into the garage and enter from the garage right into your house, thereby bypassing any encounter with your neighbor. So to Stuart's point, there are intentional things we can do because our neighbors are real people. what's interesting is I've been thinking about this idea of loving our neighbors, and Romans 13 came up in the morning reading today. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And I've been thinking about who is my neighbor, and the conversation in my particular breakout group. Al suggested that the Samaritan in the story might give us a clue to the fact that it's the person, the unsuspecting person, the person we might even view as an enemy or an outsider, that's doing the good work. And there's some data that a friend of mine was sharing at a talk, and it is to do with nuns and duns, people who have no spirituality, the nun, and the people who are done with spirituality or faith, the done. And what's interesting is, folks, the done category, they have on a scale of from cold to warm, in terms of appreciating or liking or looking positively upon. Evangelicals are on the low end of their warmth. They don't look positively on evangelicals, probably because they're done with faith. They probably had a bad religious experience, a bad experience in church, and now they're sort of, they don't like these people. We should expect this, I think. What's interesting is when we flip the category and we talk about people who weekly attend a faith congregation, us, Christians, and we look at our perspectives on various social groups, you'll see that atheists are on the low end. The very people that we are called to love are the people we don't like. Let that sink in for a second, because Jesus says this in Matthew 5. He says, "You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So I want you to consider that question again: who is my neighbor? But now reflect on, who is my neighbor that I find really difficult to love? And how can I serve them? How can I love them this week? See you Sunday.